Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few logistics for today's webinar. There are two audio options. You can either choose to use your computer audio or listen in on your phone. If you choose to call in, please dial the phone number listed. After about a 30 to 35-minute presentation, we will open up the forum for questions. You may submit questions at any point by simply typing your question on the question box and clicking send. At the end of the presentation, we will go through and answer as many questions as we can. For any questions we don't get to, or if you have any questions after today, we will list staff contact information at the end of the presentation, and you may contact them to follow up. Please note that today's presentation is being recorded and will be made available online at planningforla.org, as well as on our department's YouTube channel, Planning for LA. Before we begin, please make sure you are able to access a handout we've made available via the webinar platform. The sheet is titled Home Sharing Ordinance Useful Links. We may reference this sheet during today's presentation, and it's a helpful tool to have as you navigate through the ordinance and the registration process. And as far as today's topic, we understand there may be some confusion about the city's ordinance, and also understand that the adoption of the city's home sharing ordinance affects many people in many different ways. This presentation is intended to cover topics for both hosts, potential hosts, as well as neighbors affected by the ordinance. We want to recognize that people may be here to learn and ask questions about various aspects of the home sharing ordinance. And as mentioned, please feel free to submit questions during and after the presentation, and we will do our best to make sure they are answered. So very briefly, we want to go over today's agenda. First, we'll review some background information about the policy behind the city's regulations, including more context on how a motion for the home sharing ordinance was initiated and how the home sharing ordinance came to be adopted. We'll go over what activities are covered by the ordinance, what the rules are, and how to determine if you are eligible for the home sharing program. We'll also cover effective dates for these rules and what will and what has happened post-effective date of the ordinance. Next, we'll go over the process entailed in registering to become a home sharing host, and we'll review the documentation required to apply for the program. We'll spend some time talking about the rules for hosts, how enforcement is handled, and how we'll deal with any issues related to compliance with the ordinance. We'll then spend some time talking about what extended home sharing is and how that program will be implemented. And then finally, we'll spend some time looking ahead to highlight what else may be considered for the home sharing ordinance. Following all of that, we will have our question and answer portion of our webinar. So today we are joined by the city planning staff who worked on drafting the home sharing ordinance, as well as staff who is currently implementing the adopted rules. We have City Planner Matt Glesney from our City Planning Citywide Housing Policy Division. We also have City Planning Associate Callie Hardy, who's also from our Citywide Housing Policy Division. And we also have Principal City Planner Bob Duenas from our Development Services Centers. This is where the implementation and enforcement of the home sharing ordinance is located. And I'm Jenna Monterosa, City Planner and Council Liaison for Los Angeles City Planning, and your moderator for today's presentation. So with that, we'll get started, and I'll pass this off to Matt Glesney.
Hi, I'm Matt Glesney with the Department of City Planning, and I'll be taking the slides from here. We'll start by giving some context about the short-term rental industry in Los Angeles. Prior to the city's home sharing ordinance, the short-term rental of housing was technically illegal, but there were very few regulations and ability to enforce the ordinance, and therefore there were very few protections in place. And to back up, when we're speaking about short-term rentals, we're talking about the market of a listing, a unit, or home for less than 30 consecutive days. So what we're not talking about are long-term leases, where we have existing landlord and tenant protections in place. Short-term rental activity has been steadily rising and is concentrated in the city's entire home listings, which has created growing concerns over the loss of the city's long-term housing supply, especially in areas where we've had the highest concentration of listings. And you can see the numbers on the slide. These are of last year. We had about 33,000 listings in the city, which was an increase of about 50% over the last 2 years. About 55% of those short-term rental listings are multifamily. 69% were listed as the entire home and not a shared room or a private room. and about 9,200 of those units were listed more than 120 days a year, which we'll discuss later in reference to the cap. As we know, short-term rentals is a controversial topic. There are many benefits to short-term rentals, and there are many challenges. Some of the benefits we've heard about include providing additional household income for many families. The extra income has been very helpful. It also allows for the efficient use of extra space that may be available. And third, we've heard about home sharing promoting social interaction and cultural tourism in some of our neighborhoods. Some of the challenges we've heard about are probably most significantly around our housing supply. We face a housing crisis and a lack of housing supply in the city of Los Angeles, and the concern about losing units has been at the top of mind of policymakers, as well as the potential for nuisances and party houses. And there's also concerns about changes to the city's residential character of our neighborhoods. As certain neighborhoods become very popular for short-term rental use, they may lose some of their residential feeling. So as I mentioned, some of the prior regulations really dealt with traditional short-term rental industries like the hotel and motel industry, but short-term rentals and home sharing really was not regulated. So the only places where 30-day rentals were allowed prior to this ordinance were in hotels and motels, something called a transient occupancy residential structure, which is essentially a hotel that is allowed to have a kitchen. Both of those uses were allowed through a conditional use permit only in certain zones, largely in R4 zones or above. Lastly, we also had an allowance for bed and breakfasts, which are only allowed in designated historical buildings through a conditional use permit. But besides those uses, home sharing was not an allowed use or short-term rental. So about 4 years ago, we received direction from the City Council to do something about this issue. The council motion came from our council members Bonin, Wesson, and Koretz on June 2nd, 2015. The motion directed the city planning department to create short-term rental regulations that would, number one, authorize hosts to rent in their primary residence. 2, to prohibit short-term rentals in buildings subject to the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, or RSO. And third, we were asked to create an ordinance that would capture transient occupancy tax, or TOT tax, or sometimes called hotel tax. So the planning department took that direction and drafted a proposed ordinance. The ordinance was available for public comment for about 3 years. The final ordinance was adopted in December 2018 with an effective date of July 1st, 2019. And in June and July, the department indicated that the enforcement would begin of the ordinance in full on November 1st, 2019. So what is covered by the home sharing ordinance? The home sharing ordinance covers rental stays of less than 30 days, or 30 days or less. Any stay of more than 30 days is not covered by the ordinance. We're talking about short-term rentals of one's primary residence. So as I mentioned, we are not talking about stays of more than 31 days or more. Stays of 31 days or more are completely unregulated by the home sharing ordinance and may continue and are treated like a regular long-term rental agreement. We're also not talking about legally established hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, and the transient occupancy structures, which were already permitted and not affected by the ordinance. So now we'll get into how one can qualify for home sharing under the home sharing program. So first of all, a host needs to demonstrate that they are the primary residents of the unit that they wish to do home sharing in. There is a small exception where pre-2017 accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, do not need to be the primary residence. You can live in the main home and rent out your ADU as home sharing if the ADU was permitted prior to 2017, January 2017, I should say. The second main qualification is that the residence is located in a zone that permits residential housing. That's most of the city, however, not in our manufacturing and industrial zones or open space zones and a few other zones that do not permit housing. But housing is permitted in our commercial zones and our residential zones. Third, housing cannot be subject to the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, or RSO. No listings of RSO or rent control units are permitted. Units are subject to the rent control ordinance generally if they're in a building that is built before 1978 and where there are more than 2 or more units on the lot. It's generally subject to rent control. Buildings with a temporary exemption, sometimes called a T1 exemption, for being owner-occupied are still subject to the rent control or rent stabilization ordinance, and therefore home sharing is not permitted in those units with a temporary exemption. Fourth, a unit cannot be subject to a restricted affordable housing covenant or have had an Ellis Act conversion to a single-family home within the last 5 years. These are both protections of the city's affordable housing stock. Fifth, if you are a tenant and wish to do home sharing, you will need to have your landlord approval. That is just through a written document that we've provided through the home sharing administrative guidelines and available on our website. It's just a signed approval from your landlord. And lastly, you need to be legally registered as a host within the city. That means you need to come and register through the city's online registration portal and have a registration number. Okay, we wanted to talk about the primary residence, as this is a core component of the ordinance. As mentioned, all home sharing units need to occur in a primary residence, except for that narrow ADU exclusion I mentioned. Primary residence is defined as the residence where host resides more than 6 months of the year. So a host can only have one primary residence where they live more than half the year. Generally, we're talking about the property associated with the address where the host resides. If there are multiple units on a property, the primary residence is the unit in which the host resides. When it comes to detached structures, home sharing is permitted in any space approved for residential use. This may include a backyard accessory structure that is considered safe and habitable by the Department of Building and Safety, if it is associated with your address and not a full accessory dwelling unit permitted after 2017. What is prohibited is using parts of the property that are not approved for residential use and therefore not safe and habitable. And we're talking about structures such as garages or recreational vehicles, storage rooms, attics, or other temporary structures where residential use is generally not permitted. Now, we'd like to talk about some of the additional home sharing regulations. Once you've been registered as a host, the following regulations would apply to host. First off, there's a 120 hosted day limit per calendar year. That is, everybody with a regular home sharing permit can rent less than 30 days for a cumulative total of 120 days per calendar year. That number would reset at the beginning of a calendar year, and another 120 days would be permitted as long as you are registered. Second, there's a maximum of 2 adults per habitable room. This is an occupancy limit that will be stated on your registration certificate when you are registered and receive your final registration. This information is based on the number of habitable rooms that hosts tell us through their application process that they have in the property. And the administrative guidelines explain exactly what a habitable room is. It's generally any room except for a kitchen, storage rooms, or bathrooms, generally where sleeping and living can occur. That occupancy limit does not include children, so unlimited amount of children are allowed to exceed that occupancy limit. Third, there's a limit on one set of guests being booked at a time on a property. So while hosts may have multiple listings, they can only rent one of those listings to one set of guests at a time. The concern was that homes with multiple set of guests begins to resemble a boarding house or a hotel situation, which is not the intent of the home sharing ordinance. Fourth, the ordinance prohibits commercial uses or events under home sharing. So these would be renting of homes for events for profit purposes, to sell products. Other commercial uses are not covered under home sharing. And last, there's no commercial uses or events allowed as part of home sharing. And there are also restrictions on late night outdoor congregations that may lead to noise violations. Additional hosting responsibilities include maintaining the safety of the unit. That is, the installation of working fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, and carbon monoxide detectors. This should be certified through an affidavit at the time of registration. Additionally, the ordinance requires that a code of conduct be established and present on the premises, outlining the basic responsibilities of guests as they stay in your property, as well as an indication of emergency numbers and emergency exits. Hosts must also post their registration number on all of their listings for short-term rental in the city. Most platforms have a place for you to put your registration number, but that registration number does need to be included somewhere on the listing for it to be a legal listing for short-term rental in Los Angeles. And last, the ordinance asks hosts to take responsibility for any nuisance behavior that may occur during the home sharing. Next, we'd like to talk about the home sharing registration process. The City of Los Angeles Planning Department has set up an online registration portal at the website you can see below. You can also find the portal by going to the main Department of City Planning website and looking for the home sharing icon. The online registration portal will take you through a series of steps to document that you are the primary residence and meet the other requirements of the ordinance. Documentation required through the process to verify primary residence includes a valid federal or state-issued photo ID, as well as a proof of primary residency. If your valid federal state photo ID address matches the address where home sharing is occurring, you will only need one additional piece of primary residence documentation. However, if there is not a match, 2 additional documents will be needed. In addition, the landlord approval will be asked for if you are a tenant. That again is a form that can be uploaded through the online portal. Third, we'd ask that you agree and affirmatively declare that you are in alignment and in conformance with all the home sharing regulations. We will also check that there are no open or pending citations at the property. The idea is that an unsafe situation should be resolved and citations should be resolved before home sharing registration may occur. At the end of the process, you are asked to pay the $89 application fee, which can be done through credit card or ACH electronic checking. And finally, there's a process to ensure that transient occupancy tax, or TOT, is collected. In most cases, platforms may already be collecting on behalf of the hosts. If not, you would indicate as such through the portal, and your information will be transferred to the Office of Finance, where that process will begin, and they will send you out information to register you for paying the TOT. Additional considerations during the registration process include that hosts may not apply for more than one home sharing registration number. There's a limit generally, again, to a primary residence, and so the idea is every host should only have one address or one location where home sharing may occur. Hosts may register for more than one listing, as mentioned. However, they must include each website and URL on our registration portal. So you can have a listing for a 1-bedroom, and you could have a separate listing for a 2-bedroom, but each of those listings must include the registration number, and you must also inform the city about those websites and those URLs through the portal system. And again, your pending registration number or your final registration number must be posted on all listings on all home sharing platforms to ensure compliance. Next, we'll talk about compliance and enforcement of the home sharing ordinance. So the home sharing ordinance created new proactive enforcement tools that complement the city's existing enforcement. This includes use of a process called the Administrative Citation Enforcement Program, or ACE. The ACE program is developed as a way to issue citations without resulting in a criminal liability. It's under the Civil Code. The system is set up to issue warnings if the department finds a home sharing listing that is not registered with the city or otherwise not permitted. The city would be sending a warning letter to hosts and to property owners and to hosting platforms indicating that the listing should be removed or fines could commence. The system also enforces the 120-day cap that was mentioned, assuming that the host has not applied for extended home sharing, which does allow for year-round home sharing beyond the cap. And we'll cover that extended home sharing permit later. So as again, we're approaching November 1st, and November 1st is the day that enforcement is set to be initiated. So we encourage everyone to please register and put those registration numbers on your listing before November 1st. The ordinance does provide specific fines for violations of the home sharing ordinance. This includes a $500 daily fine or 2 times the nightly rate, whichever is greater, for advertising a unit for short-term rental without a valid registration number. Fines are only levied after warning letters are issued and no action is taken to remedy. And just to be clear what a citation is defined as any violation or administrative citation related to the property condition or activities at the property as issued by the city's enforcement agencies, including the Los Angeles Police Department, HZLA, which is the Housing Department, Los Angeles Building and Safety, LADBS, or the Los Angeles Fire Department. There are additional fines for listing beyond the 120-day cap without a valid extended home sharing registration. Those fines are the greater of $2,000 per day or 2 times the nightly rate, whichever is greater. In addition, there is a separate set of citations and fines for hosting platforms that book illegal listings or do not provide data in compliance with the ordinance. Next, we'll talk about suspensions and revocations of your home sharing permit. Registered hosts that receive 2 sustained citations in the registered year will be suspended for 30 days. Again, we've mentioned what citations are, but these can be violations for the city's party house ordinance, any nuisance citations, or any code citation by city's code enforcement agencies. 2 of those in a year will result in an automatic suspension for 30 days. Hosts receiving 3 sustained citations in a year will be revoked and will be ineligible to apply for 1 year from the date of the revocation. In addition, any egregious or nuisance violations outside of these parameters may also be subject to added operational conditions or discontinuance of use based on the city's administrative nuisance abatement process. This would be an action brought by the planning department where there's an opportunity for public hearings and to place conditions on the use of the property or to discontinue and revoke the permit. Next, we'll talk about the extended home sharing process, or EHS, as we're calling it. So extended home sharing allows for home sharing 365 days per year. This allows one to go beyond the regular 120-day cap for regular home sharing. Extended home sharing is only available for hosts who have been registered with the city for 6 months or who have already been registered and hosted for 60 days. The online registration portal will ask you to submit that documentation for the 60 days. The city will have record if you've been registered for 6 months. The extended home sharing registration is done through the online registration portal, just like the regular home sharing. And once granted, it's valid for 1 year from the time of issuance. And there would be need to renew that on an annual basis, just like the regular home sharing. The extended home sharing does cost $850 to register, and that fee also applies to the annual renewal. The extended home sharing portal is available now online through the city's online registration portal. I should also mention that hosts are ineligible if their home sharing registration has been suspended or revoked in the last year. I should also mention that extended home sharing may not be available for hosts where their registration has been suspended or revoked in the prior 2 years. The extended home sharing process includes 2 possible different processes depending on whether there have been citations at the property. The first process that most folks will go through is called a ministerial or a by right approval. This is available for hosts who have received no more than 1 verified citation in the last 3 years. The process requires a notification to adjacent and abutting owners and occupants. They are not asked to comment or otherwise provide their opinion on the home sharing registration. It is just a notification. In addition, we've mentioned the $850 application fee and the ability to complete the registration online. The second process for extended home sharing is called a discretionary approval process. This process is required for hosts who have had 2 or more verified citations in the last 3 years. This process is a bit more involved and does require the same notification of adjacent and abutting neighbors, but also may require a public hearing. This is optional by the Department of City Planning based on case-specific factors and whether a public hearing would be necessary to find more facts about the home sharing application. This discretionary process does allow the department to condition the approval, which would mean putting conditions on perhaps the operation or other limitations beyond what exists in the home sharing ordinance. The process also requires that the planning department make required findings that the use of extended home sharing is compatible with the neighborhood and is not expected to cause significant issues. This discretionary process is appealable and does include a higher fee to apply, $5,660. This process would also be completed online through the portal partially, but would also require an in-person filing with the Department of City Planning at our Development Services counter at 201 North Figueroa. We wanted to talk more about the suspension and revocation process as it relates to extended home sharing. So hosts that receive 2 sustained citations will be suspended from extended home sharing for 30 days or as long as 1 citation is open. Hosts receiving 3 sustained citations within a registration year will be revoked from the program. Next, we wanted to talk about the complaint process. Complaints about home sharing may be submitted by anyone at any time using the city's 24/7 complaint hotline, and the number is 213-267-7788. You can also reach this line through the 311 contact center, which is just dialing 311 or 213-472-3231. The complaint hotline will take your complaint and ask you to identify yourself and therefore receive a callback. That is not required. A complaint of current operating concerns, such as a party or other nuisances or other potential violations of the ordinance, will result in a call to the host and an attempt to resolve the situation. If the situation is not able to be successfully resolved, the complaint will then go to the appropriate enforcement agencies. So finally, we wanted to talk about what's next with the ordinance. There are some additional pending motions that were requested by various city council members to look at various amendments to the program. For example, Council Files 18-1245 and 18-1247 request that the City Planning Department look at the potential for expanding home sharing into certain owner-occupied small multifamily buildings that are subject to the RSO. Those reports are currently pending in the Planning and Land Use Management Committee of City Council, and the City Planning Department will be providing a report on those very soon. Next, we'd like to let you know how to stay connected. If you'd like to receive more information about these motions, the best way is to go to the LACityClerk Connect website. At the Los Angeles City Clerk website, you can click on the Council File Management System. From there, you can type in those council file numbers that I mentioned on the prior slide, and you will then be taken to the page for those council files, at which point you can click the envelope to request email notifications of any action that occurs, including any forthcoming city council dates. This system also allows you to send comments to the council file and the city council for them to consider. You would just send a letter or an email to the city clerk and reference the council file numbers that I've just mentioned. Also, we wanted to mention a vacation rental ordinance that this Department of City Planning is also working on. Vacation rentals are being defined as short-term rentals of an owner-occupied dwelling unit that is lived in only intermittently by the owner and not used for long-term rentals. So these would be non-primary residences in certain types of dwelling units. This ordinance has not yet been released and would go through a complete public vetting process, but the proposed ordinance as drafted would regulate and allow for a class of non-primary residence vacation rentals in the city of Los Angeles. The ordinance would establish new restrictions on the number of licenses that the city would issue and may also establish a citywide cap to prevent wholesale conversion of long-term housing into vacation units. More information on the vacation rental ordinance will be forthcoming when the department releases the ordinance. Finally, we just wanted to go through some additional online resources that are available for hosts. We've mentioned the city's online registration portal, which is available through the Department of City Planning website. And here's a picture of what that looks like when you get there. We also wanted to mention the City Planning's Department's Zone Information Map Access System, or ZEMIS. ZEMIS is a web-based mapping tool that provides zoning information for properties located in the city of Los Angeles. ZEMIS was developed by Los Angeles City Planning to assist businesses and residents in making better informed land use decisions. Using the street address, assessor parcel number, APN, or other identifiers of a property, the ZEMIS search tool looks up zoning requirements for users. You can find ZEMIS at zemis.lacity.org. Once you get to the ZEMIS site, you'll enter the address of the unit you're interested in registering. From there, you can find information on the zoning, including whether the property is zoned to allow for residential use. Again, these would be zones that usually start with R or C, although there is additional nuance zones that the department can help you with if you're not sure. The ZMIS tool can also show whether your unit is subject to the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, or RSO. You would click on the Housing tab to see whether your property is considered subject to the RSO according to the city. I'll just mention that this is the information that the department looks at when you submit an application, and if you feel there is a mistake and your property should not be subject to the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, the online registration portal does allow for you to submit additional information about why you feel your property is not subject, and then we will investigate with the Housing Department, or HCID LA. Thank you very much.